token batches. This is what's happened in the 2 years since GPT-3 came out. Costs have plummeted from $60 per million tokens to cents per million tokens. Things are getting wild. And I want to talk about how we got here, what this means for the industry, and long-term, how is AI going to change, I guess, everything going forward. Since these videos aren't AI generated, I do have to pay my team, so a quick word from today's sponsor, then we'll get right back to it. I'm really excited about today's sponsor because it's a company I've loved for a very long time, and they're giving me an excuse to talk about one of my favorite things, Elixir. If you're trying to ship quality, fast, and at scale, Dockyard has you covered. These guys know how to scale better than almost anyone I've talked to. They've been contributing heavily to open source ecosystem stuff, especially the Elixir world, which, as you might know, I love. There's a reason that tech scales so well and why everyone from Discord to WhatsApp leans heavily on those tools. They know scale incredibly well. And I'm so excited to see them diving more into this AI world too. These guys aren't your usual AI devs. I know that term has some specific connotations to it. I know them as open source champions doing incredible work in the ecosystems I've spent a lot of time in. They're good friends, and I can't imagine you'd be in bad hands with them. Not that you have to trust me, by the way. There's a lot of companies here you've probably heard about before, like maybe NASDAQ or Adobe. If you want to work with the same engineers that those companies reached out to for help, they're pretty hard to beat. They know everything you'd need to know for good full stack development, be it all the crazy server-side stuff. I mean, they're the Elixir guys. Of course they know that. But they also know everything about modern tech stacks. I know they know React surprisingly well, but they also are deep on Swift, crazy enough. They built their own alternative to React Native in order to render Elixir apps natively on iOS. Whether you're trying to spin up from scratch or you're trying to make sure your existing tech scales, these guys have you covered. If you want to learn more, you should definitely book a call. It's free and they'll give you a ton of useful info. Make sure you tell them that Theo sent you. Thank you to Dockyard for sponsoring today's video. Check them out today. It's soydev.link/Dockyard. So what happened here? Especially like the 3 to 3.5 move, where it went from $60 per million tokens to $20 for better inference, to way, way cheaper soon after that. A lot of things happened. The biggest one, without question, though, is competition. There are two core axes that are being fought on for these wars. There is the quality of outputs. There is price. There's a bunch of other random things that they like to talk about that I care a lot about too, like speed, API capabilities, I'll say UI, UX, and product features. All of these are cool. All of these things like demo really well on Twitter and are super fun. None of that is the model war though, because these are entirely different things. Most of what goes on here, I can do. I can make real change here, even though I'm not making models, I'm not training shit on a bunch of GPUs, but I'm still able to impact real things here. I can make cool stuff in this space, but there's a limited number of people that have very expensive specific resources that are able to compete on this section here. And this has had interesting impacts on the industry. In particular, it seemed for a while that the only way to make money in AI was to live here, because if you weren't competing in this area, but you built a really good UI or a really good product that used models from someone else, OpenAI could just show up and do that. And that was the assumption. Turns out that assumption's kind of bad, because now we're doing the opposite, where people like me are coming in, making a clone of OpenAI's product that's better, still providing OpenAI models, and the result is really good. Someone else pointed out another really good thing that they're kind of competing on, context window. This is one of those ones where like we can't do much from the outside. Same with speed. So if we break these down, I'd say the first category, and only model makers can really change that. For context window, mostly model makers, but we can hack it. And then the bottom section here, anyone can kind of do this. And if we think of the model wars in these three categories, it'll make it a lot easier to process what's going on right now, because this war has been going brutally for a while, and the results are showing in pretty much every chart. Let's chart these two. We'll start with the quality. So we have time on one side, quality on the other. This has been an interesting race. I'll use blue to represent OpenAI. No, it's their favorite color. For a certain amount of time, I'm just going to draw an arbitrary cutoff here. We'll say pre and post GPT-3. Kind of funny that we have a before GPT-3 and after GPT-3. Can label them BGPT-3 and AG. I'm not going to make the joke. Anyways, up until then, there were cool things going on, like autocorrect, things like automatic translations and shit. Like we were making real improvements slowly but surely. Like the quality of what a computer could generate was going up. But GPT-3 represented a monumental leap in the ability for a computer to generate text given arbitrary input. This was the from autocomplete to actually useful move with GPT-3. And when this happened, it wasn't just the model they dropped. They also put out a bunch of research papers detailing how LLMs worked and why this model was so valuable. And as a result, we quickly saw others starting to build their own stuff and try to catch up. We got a pretty monumental leap from the competition relatively early. We saw crazy things like Mistral showing up, the Llama work starting, a bunch of random other open models that weren't particularly great, but a lot of work started happening really quickly with the launch of GPT-3. But as soon as the quality started getting even close, 3.5 dropped. And with 3.5, we saw yet another big quality jump. This was also like the hype was going. People were diving in on it. And OpenAI was working hard to make things more efficient behind the scenes too, so they could lower the price. Also, they saw that the gap between them and the competition was closing. Especially near the end of GPT-3, it seemed like those other models were starting to really catch up and this space was starting to close. But every time they drop something new, the space widens again. We all realize that OpenAI is pretty far ahead, and then things start catching up. But two things have happened. The amount of time to catch up has been going down, and also the size of the wins OpenAI seeing has gone down too. 3.5 to 4 was nowhere near as big as I and many others were expecting. And 4 to 4.0, I would argue, was even smaller. It was cool for the price side, which we'll get to in a second, but it was not a particularly monumental win in quality. And as such, this line has been catching up more and more. And the amount of work it has to do to catch up is going down each time. It's getting closer sooner. Then we got O1 and O3, which helped bump the quality again. But I really want to think of quality in this way, where the quality bar is kind of set by OpenAI. And then the rest of the industry is competing to get as close as possible to where OpenAI is at any given time. We have certainly surpassed 4.0, but I haven't really seen much of anything that's truly surpassed O1 or certainly not even O3 mini on high. Like the quality you can get out of those models is nuts. Claude is better at some things, but it's not a meaningfully better model overall, especially when you consider the price for it. But this is just the quality side though. So let's take this and do price instead, because the price is a very, very different chart. 3 to 3.5 was a huge drop in price. I'll even extend this a bit to be a bit more realistic about how absurd it was. Because 3 to 3.5 was a crazy drop in price. The important thing to know is that as alternatives started coming out, none of them started that high. And the alternatives have been fighting this crazy race to the bottom with ups and downs of their own, to be fair. But the alternatives were always priced quite a bit lower. And if I was to be more realistic, probably looks like that. And with each of the new ships that OpenAI does, they do their best. Actually, I don't think 4 was a big lowering in price initially. You can check that other chart that we had. A 3.5 Turbo was a huge drop, actually. It's funny because Turbo wasn't a big quality win at all, but it was a huge drop in price. I think 4 was basically the same price at that point. It's almost like keeping 3 in here makes the chart unreadable. OpenAI has a weird ability to make charts unreadable. I spent a lot of time on artificial analysis recently, which is a place to take a look at different models and how they compare and what their performance looks like. Here's a bunch of the like more popular, well-established, trusted models right now. The thing I was saying about OpenAI is that this chart, intelligence versus price, O1 is so hilariously expensive that it throws this chart off. That said, O1's price is half of what GPT-3's price was at launch. And if I turn off O1 here, the chart suddenly becomes useful again. I just thought it was really funny that O1 is so skewed in price that it ruins charts by having it on there. It gives you a whole different story when you add and remove that. This also shows why I'm so frustrated with Claude, because the price relative to what it can do is not there anymore. Yeah. So if we put O1 in here, like it's going to be here, which is not necessarily useful for the chart I'm trying to draw here of the race to the bottom. But also, if we compare O1 to, I don't know, O3, hilariously cheaper, similar quality. To go back here, O3 mini actually fits in that quadrant of like well-priced. O1 is literally, 10x more expensive? Let me go to my chart here. Yeah. O3 mini, $1.10 for input, $4.40 for output. O1 is literally more than 10 times as expensive. Insanity. But there's a reason that the first thing OpenAI put out after O1 was O3. And specifically, it was O3 Mini. When O1 came out, they put all of the models with it out at once. When O3 came out, it didn't come out. O3 is still not out. Only O3 Mini is. And I think that happened because of another scary thing over here. O1 was the first major quality leap we'd seen in a while. And they did that because it was the first major reasoning model. And this seemed like it would be hard for the industry to catch up with. And it was. Until something interesting happened. R1 got so close to O1 that it definitely set some fear over in the OpenAI world. But what was much crazier is, despite O1 going up with price, we're going to zoom in to see where we're putting this line. DeepSeek stayed in that cheap range. So O1, to get that quality, had to 10x prices. DeepSeek got to stay in the cheap range and also be an open model, which also, as many of us saw and probably even felt, caused the stock market some pain as well. Seems like the way they made R1 so cheap was by taking it out of the stock for all the companies we're invested in. Real talk, though, there was a strategic decision made here by OpenAI. You might notice if you look at the O3 and the R1 numbers closely, they literally strategically picked exactly double R1's costs with O3 Mini. If you tell me that O3 Mini wasn't clearly a move by OpenAI to make sure DeepSeek wasn't going to destroy them, it's very, very obvious that is what was going on here. Because this number doesn't make any sense relative to the other numbers they charge. It's not a fraction of one of them. It's not close to any of them. $4.40 is a really weird amount to charge, unless your competition is $2.20. So you're doing exactly double, promising more quality, way easier to host because R1 still sucks to actually run. It is clear now that despite how in the quality world OpenAI leads the pack and everyone else fights to catch up, price is the opposite, where everyone else is leading and OpenAI is forced to catch up when crazy things happen, like what we saw with R1. R1 was so brutal to what OpenAI was trying to do that they were forced to release O3, specifically that mini model. Unprecedented for them to do a mini model first and to lower the price as much as they did and to footgun themselves like that, because O3 Mini is pretty close to O1 in quality. The only reason they do that is because they were scared of how this red line looked. And if you were to draw this as a gap where we took the price and put it at the bottom here, I'll make it green for price. We put it here relative to the time of all these things releasing. The gap between industry pricing and OpenAI pricing for the best models and quality there, this gap was insane. And if we compare it to where DeepSeek was, yeah, this is what happened. This space here, the quality to price, that ratio has gone insane over the last few months in particular. It was going down, but the race to the bottom there has been nuts to watch. And to see something like Gemini come out at the lowest prices we've seen from any major model with quality comparable to that of 4.0 is just insane. The reason I took the AI pill and started building T3 chat was that I was so impressed with DeepSeek V3. I saw for the first time, oh, that's literally 20 times cheaper than Claude at a similar quality level. I want to build things with this. Wow, the DeepSeek site kind of sucks. I want to build my own better one. And that spiraled to a relatively successful AI app. This race has been nuts to watch, and it made me go from sitting on the sidelines to participating. And that's what's been fun. This has had an interesting side effect, though, which is that the moat these companies had is starting to erode. I have another video I'm planning on doing soon. I might even record it today, funny enough, all about how the wrappers are the winners here. Because none of the battle we're talking about here, none of this helps OpenAI. This hurts them. Their margins are rapidly going down, and their lead in quality across the industry is rapidly closing. Their advantage in quality is dying fast, and their advantage in price is non-existent. They're fighting their hardest to catch up in price, while at the same time releasing a $200 a month subscription and losing money on that, by the way. It's not like they're arbitrarily pricing these things really high. It's they've been so focused on raising quality that price wasn't as much a concern. They dropped it where they could because the industry trend was scary, but O1 shows that they weren't that concerned. They felt like their quality lead was great enough that they could price it however they wanted. And honestly, they kind of could, but that's dead now. They can't keep fighting the battle at that position. The quality gap has now closed enough that they can't do a 10x multiplier on price. Certainly not the 100x plus they're doing compared to some of these other options. That position isn't tenable anymore. And if that was just their margin, that's one thing. If they can just erase the margin, insane thing. We are currently losing money on OpenAI Pro subscriptions. That's the $200 a month tier that introduces O1 Pro. That model is so expensive for them to run that just the GPU and inference cost alone is greater than the money they're making from the subscriptions, which is insane. Their models are actually that expensive to run. So their margin here isn't crazy. Their costs are. And now that we have these open models that are close in quality, now we have companies like Google competing with quality and demolishing with price. Things are changing fast. And if it was really hard to switch between models, they'd have a moat. Like, let's compare this to something like AWS, the web services that most of us use for the web. If AWS came out with a crazy price that was super high, and suddenly the industry spun up a bunch of alternatives that were way more competitive in price, it would still be hard to move off of AWS because you've built your infra on it. You can't just click a button or change one line of code and move to a different provider. You can literally do that with these AI apps. Here's the actual code for T3 chat for rendering with the right model and picking the model for when you're actually generating the text. And if I look for where this is being consumed in stream text, this is where I would have to change the code. I can change which model I'm passing here. I can change a lot of other things. I could even just put OpenAI 4.0 mini. And if I had that imported, this would just work. Cool. Now that's running 4.0 mini. Let's change it again. Let's change the default model. I don't know. What do we want to use today? Use Google's. Let's switch to Google. Google. Sure. If we want Flash 2, cool. Now the model's Flash 2. It's actually that easy. When I changed the title generation over in T3 chat from 4.0 mini to use Gemini, it was a one line of code change. There is no moat in the model provider world. And that's awesome. This is going to be a crazy, crazy competitive industry. It'd be like, it's less like car pricing, more like food pricing. If a new grocery store opened up right next to your grocery store and everything was 1/10 as expensive and pretty much the same quality, you'd stop going to the old grocery store. Since these things are so expendable, since these things are so consumable, so easy to switch between, OpenAI has to fight hard in order to stay on top. And it shows. The industry has driven the price into the ground. And this is an article from November of last year. It's gotten crazier since. To be fair, you wouldn't even be able to see it because the $60 per million tokens number at the start here is so insane that the scale makes it hard to appreciate that we're seeing 50% wins consistently. The price of this shit has gone down by more than 50% year over year for the last 3 years now. It's kind of nuts. Sorry, that's not even fair. It's closer to 10x decrease in price every year right now. Insane. And that lines up too. If we go back here and we look at like 4.0 mini, groundbreaking in price, but next to 4.0, like 4.0 still was cheap at the time, $250 in, $10 out. I prefer Flash to 4.0, and it is a 20th the price. That's insane. Basically what I'm saying is Anthropic is fucked. If they don't get a new model out way cheaper soon, they're done. They're riding off of fumes right now. OpenAI has been cornered to the point where they can't just keep dropping new expensive shit. The expensive stuff's no longer going to be models. It's going to be products. So instead of just dropping O3 at an even higher price like they could have, they put out O3 mini for cheap and they make a new product that's an entirely different world, like deep research. OpenAI realized this space sucks to compete in. If they are looking at the 3 wars to fight in the space, the war they started with sucks and they don't like it anymore. In this war, yeah, they made it a little bit faster. They don't really seem to care about competing here either. This is where they want to win. OpenAI seems a lot more focused on product right now than models. The model wars are making them look bad enough that they're talking about this more again, but their releases are here. Things like deep research, things like the scheduling product, things like the operator that can control your browser. They want to compete there now because this has been so heavily commoditized that they can't make as much money here anymore. And they know that. The writing's on the wall. This war sucked. And this war is also more fun to compete in. It's less expensive, more flexible. You have engineers working on things that are much more fun. You don't need a bunch of scientists inventing new mathematical processes to try and make GPUs 20% more efficient 5% of the time. So I'm curious to see what this ends up meaning for the industry. My hypothesis is that companies like Claude and OpenAI are going to stop competing with each other and are going to start competing with people like me, people like Perplexity, people who are building the product that takes advantage of these models. Because the model wars aren't a place where you can make as much money anymore. And with this race to the bottom, even if you make a groundbreaking model that's 10 times cheaper and 99% as good, someone else will make something 11 times cheaper and 99.5% as good in just a few weeks. We have raced to the bottom so fast, the charts don't even make sense to look at anymore. And I think it's important to consider that when we think about what's going on in the AI space. I'm curious how you guys feel, though. Am I insane for thinking that these model companies have priced themselves out of being competitive? Am I just delusional because I live in product land? Or do the margins here just not make sense anymore? And does the forcing functions here of the industry pulling GPT pricing down versus GPT pulling the quality bar up, how do you guys feel? Let me know what you think in the comments. Go give T3 Chat a shot. And until next time, peace, nerds.